Hello, and thank you for logging on to the podcast for the Foundation for Physician Advancement, a nonprofit built by and run by physicians to help other physicians prepare for practicing in today's healthcare environment. I'm Marney Reid, the Executive Director, and we are looking forward to a great discussion today. Today, we have an exciting discussion about marketing yourself and the role of social media in brand building. We've got a mixture of what I would call the old guard. No, I'm not calling anyone old on this, especially since some of you look like you're still residents, and early career, as well as some medium tenured surgeons, to mix this up and get a bit of a good debate going on. So would love for my phenomenal faculty to introduce themselves, starting with Dr. Michael Bolognesi.
Hey, thanks, Marty. Mike Bolo here. I'm at the Duke University Medical Center, hip and knee surgeon there. And I really appreciate being identified old guard that doesn't look like he's still in high school, because I know you're talking about Springer. So anyway.
Yeah, he exfoliates.
He looks great.
Thanks, Marty. Pleasure to be here. Sean McMillan, orthopedic sports medicine surgeon out of South Jersey, just outside of Cherry Hill. Previously trained up at the University of Massachusetts with Bryan and been in practice now going on 11 years.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. AJ Rush here. I'm an orthopedic spine surgeon at Texas Back Institute in Dallas. I guess I'm one of the young guys you called out earlier. I'm in my second year of practice, and happy to be here. So thank you.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Marney. My name is Bryan Springer. I'm at Ortho Carolina in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a hip and knee surgeon, and I guess I've officially made the transition over to the old guard, particularly on this podcast, is I get to be the old crude about social media and my thoughts about social media. So looking forward to a wide discussion based on the wide variety of experiences we have here. Should be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I think I'm probably the only one who's willing to call the president of AUKUS the old guard, but it happened. All right, we're going to switch this up a little bit. We're going to start with Dr. Rush, who is currently our early career surgeon. So you went to a great academic institution, not only for residency, but then you went up to Rush for spine surgery. You saw the gamut of what people are doing, a mixture of, the Brian Cole show through Dr. Frank Phillips. Not sure if he knows how to use LinkedIn yet because he hasn't accepted my friend request. What have you learned so far joining what we would probably call a private-demic, Michael Last's favorite term, in terms of, practice politics, and how does that factor into building your brand in the community?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Where I am in my career, I think I'm lucky because, in training, we kind of do this jump around where you're like the new guy in the pond, whether it's residency, fellowship, and then obviously being the new guy in practice. And I do think politics plays a big role. I've kind of lived by the idea that you want to identify mentors early on. And for myself and advice that I've gotten from people way smarter than me, I think you want to look at 2 or 3 people that kind of have differing practice models and kind of where you want to be. And I think it's important to play the politics and be right on that. I think every young surgeon like myself, either you want to make a big splash and be some standout person, whether it's marketing, social media, like we're talking about, or even just what you're doing surgically. But at the same time, I think all those things are easier if you have the blessing and support of people that are above you that have kind of already paved the way. I always used to believe in the idea that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. But I think that at the same time, when it comes to things like marketing, where you're representing not just yourself, but also a larger entity, especially where I work, you got to tread lightly. And I think you get more support if you have more people in your corner.
I love it. Dr. Bolognesi, how does a surgeon's patient population factor into brand building and the various social media considerations for a surgeon that's going into practice these days?
Yeah, Marnie, I guess, my first answer would be, first part of my answer would be, I think it's evolving. I was listening to AJ talk there, and I was just thinking there's still sort of a mixed opinion if you think about our entire body of, say, orthopedic surgeons about the value or appropriateness of all of these different social media options, right? I mean, that's just the reality. So I think as you're considering your patient population, you sort of got to think about it the same way and say, well, what is in reality gonna help or potentially improve your branding? And I'm a hip and knee surgeon like Springer, and so to be quite candid, I suspect a lot of my patients are not big Twitter followers, right? And I appreciate you calling me a Twitter influencer. I'm far from that, but I do enjoy it. But I think it's really important as you're thinking about your population is probably as you're using social media, you probably want to be posting things that may get in front of, if not patients. I also sort of think about the people that might refer patients to you. And again, it's probably different, for Sean. He's a sports medicine guy, so maybe he's more likely to reach patients more directly than, say, me and Springer. So, I mean, I guess it's thinking about the age of your patients and certainly your likelihood of getting in front of them, so to speak. But I still think I'm learning it myself personally. I'd be curious to hear what the other folks say, particularly the AJ and Sean, who sound like they're doing more than me and Springer. I mean, I think you're always, I think, probably changing a little bit what you do and learning it as you do it.
I love that iteration, right? Not only in patient care, but in the way we're in a new world. I apparently have been shamed a few times for not having Snapchat, mostly because I feel bad about myself as a human being that's trying to utilize technology, because I don't know if it's just me, it's not user friendly. I can't figure out Snapchat. Well, I love the TM to Dr.
Marney,
McMillan.
I'll put you on a podcast or put you on a Zoom with some of my kids. They'll get you straight on that. Okay?
I love it. Or just, come to the lake house, bring Team Bolo over to the lake house. I accidentally bought a smoker the size of, I could smoke for an entire football team. Apparently I overclubbed on that one. Dr. McMillan, I've been extraordinarily impressed with your social media presence, especially LinkedIn. For me, I feel like, especially for those physicians who want to grow in academia and also, take on consulting roles, I think LinkedIn personally is a great place, to build that brand. Obviously, there's other social media channels to reach your patients and stuff. You're also an employed physician. Can you please talk about, from that perspective, how you dip your toe into social media? Also, what social media channels you have?
Yeah, so it's a fine line you have to walk when you're an employed physician. And I can tell you, having gone through this twice, I'm at the same institution that I started when I came out of fellowship, but the institution was sold about 3.5 years ago. So even though I'm in the same spot, there is new leadership. And the fine line is simply, when you're an employed physician, it's not about Sean McMillan anymore or Bolo or anyone else. It's about the institution. So I think there's always a bit of give and take with the marketing team who works for a big institution who says, like, we want to focus on, say, Virtua Health, not Sean McMillan. But at the end of the day, your name and your brand is all that you have. If you were to get up and leave, or if you were to expect the phone to ring and the phone gals that are answering to say, you're going to see Sean McMillan every time, it's not going to work. So I think the community needs to understand that. And I think if you're smart about how you do it, you can actually turn a possible adversarial approach where the hospital doesn't like the social media into a positive. And I think ways to do that are, be smart with what you post. When I post, it's certainly more along the lines of a professional. Again, whether it's an article we wrote together with my research team, or if it's a cutting edge treatment that we're offering patients, I think it's important to make sure that your social media is devoid of things that might be innocuous, but maybe doesn't represent the hospital the way you'd want to. So make sure you're keeping political posts off. Make sure you're not posting family vacation pictures on that. If it's mainly for the building of the brand, you'll tend to be a little more favorably looked at. Make sure that you're lifting others up with this as well. So when you're talking about the do's and the don'ts, you never want to thump your chest and make everything about yourself. So if I'm posting something that we're doing, for instance, when we did our first ACL bear implant, it was about the institution. So Dr. McMillan was proud to have the opportunity by Virtua Health to offer this to our patients. So that is all encompassing. I'm touching on myself. I'm touching on our patients, which are our lifeblood, and then championing the organization for being forward thinking. And that in turn got the institution who I tagged in the post to come back and say, hey, we want to be a part of this. Tell us more. And then they actually ran with three or four more other stories on that. So I think there's a way to work at this appropriately, but it can't be something where you're just firing off the hip with what you do. You have to be a little bit more calculated and precise with where you're aiming, which is your target audience, the patients, and then your big brother or big sister, so to speak, with your health organization.
Perfect. I love the tie in everything from, making sure it's about the patient first and foremost, but then also it's the politics and, it's almost a multimodal strategy or whatnot. Okay, Dr. Springer, last but very definitely not least, can you share how some of your junior partners are building their brands? Are they using websites, social media? I mean, how are they differentiating themselves from someone like you?
Yeah, I think it's really all of the above. I mean, I think, look, think how you want to about social media, but there's no question in this day and age, it's a tremendously powerful tool. It's a tremendously powerful marketing tool. And like anything that's powerful, it has the potential, to be abused, which is why I think what Sean said is so important, which is understanding that oftentimes your social media and your social media posts and your accounts don't necessarily always just represent you as much as you think it is. It may represent your group that you're in, your hospital that you work for, the group that you're employed for, and things along those lines. And I think that's such a tremendous point that's worth, reemphasizing. And I think the utilization of social media for marketing is very different across all kinds of the different groups. And I'm sure that if you asked each one of us how either we use it individually or our partners use it, you might get very different answers, because I suspect some groups have, relatively stringent policies in place. I know at Ortho Carolina, we're a large 150 person orthopedic group. We have a very robust marketing department that includes social media across all of the social media platforms. I wouldn't say that they prohibit partners from having individual sites and posting and marketing individually, but I would say their strong preference is to go through the company's social media and website and social media, various accounts for marketing. So they will do a very good job of individually marketing, new surgeons on their platforms, individually, marketing if you're running a meeting or you publish research or things along those lines. And that's just kind of the policy that we've implemented, that the preference is to go through the group social media channels as opposed to doing things individual. But I don't think there's any question that, especially some of my younger partners have become very facile in using it from an individual perspective. But it goes back to just emphasizing all the things that Sean, said about who you represent in this, what you post, and how you post responsibly.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more with, what's been said. I think I sit here as the young guy, and I'm probably a more reserved person when it comes to social media, maybe even than I should be. But I think one thing that I always find that's interesting is, as you guys said, it's not just, what the post content is or kind of who's watching, reading, et cetera. But I think there's like a definite differentiator between the audiences. Like I notice posts a lot that I think are very engaging to physicians and maybe even some of our referral sources. And then similarly, I see others that I believe probably are way more engaging to patients. And I think I would love to start the discussion of kind of what avenues any of you all kind of see. But I think certain, like LinkedIn, obviously, I think is a better way to connect with physicians and other healthcare professionals. Whereas, things like if we run the gambit of Instagram, Facebook, or even stuff like YouTube and TikTok, can be more patient centric. And then how do you decide to dial in your content to kind of either appeal to one versus the other, or is there such thing as like a universally perfect post, right? Is there something that can really boost your brand with everybody in your community, whether it's the referring physicians, other surgeons, or even obviously patients at large? But I kind of just open that up to everyone else.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, AJ. I mean, I'd have to admit, I sort of struggle with trying to figure out, the true value of each of them. And full disclosure, again, I mean, the most I do anything on is Twitter. Again, I do have family members that can mentor Marney and Snapchat if need be, but and I think those things can change. I mean, like as I think about sort of like my Twitter whatever experience, when we first started, we actually had a social media person like Springer was referring to at Ortho Carolina that set up my Twitter account, and there were sort of these she would do the posts, and it was pretty pathetic because not because she was doing a bad job, because like she was just going to do what I told her to do. And then I think over time, I've just gotten to where I do them myself because I painstakingly taught myself how to do it. But I mean, you get to where you can do it. And I think most of mine's been around orthopedic education. It's not completely restricted to that. There's other parts of my life that do sort of come into it. It's mainly orthopedic stuff, but again, that's just one of the platforms. And I think it's like, if to say my use of it has evolved, I think everybody's use of these things is continuing to evolve, and we're probably the way we use them in 1 to 3 years is probably even different than what we're doing now. It seems that way. It's getting, a lot of these things seem like they're moving so fast. And I couldn't agree more what's been said about, we do got to be a little careful about that as we consider our patients that could get caught sort of in the middle of the development, so to speak.
Yeah. So I, back in my day when I was a device rep, and instead of going back to school and getting an MBA, I decided to launch a blog on professional development. And so I learned a lot about social media. There's different strategies. And I think to Dr. McMillan's point, it's, who are your, and actually, I think it was also Dr. Springer's point about who is your audience, right? A hip and knee surgeon, that was Bolo. Hip and knee surgeon's audience is going to be found elsewhere, than a sports med or a spine, et cetera. I do know that back in the day, LinkedIn is where you go to build credibility. It's where you go to engage with key opinion leaders and establish yourself as a key opinion leader for people that you're looking to do business with. Probably not so much as patients, but, depending on your patient subset and your location, that may be a side benefactor, right? Instagram is where you humanize the brand. You want to post, a lot of pictures. You want to post things like awards and, mission trips and things like that. Maybe even, obviously based on what your family's comfortable with, some pictures of the family. Show them you're a human, right? Because your patients want to know at the end of the day that you're not simply just a great technician. They want to know that you're a human with feelings. Twitter, things disappear with, I think, 38 seconds with when you post them because of how much data is being pumped out onto that platform. We'll see what happens now that good old Chief Twit or whatever he's calling himself is doing. But really, that's just a sharing of information and where you can aggregate a ton of different types of information. Facebook is probably across the board for orthopedics, where most of you are going to find your patients. It's where you post, video tutorials, and you post things not only to educate patients about, what you do or the conditions with which they might find themselves meeting a physician such as yourself, but it's also where they may be looking up and deciding, does this person have any reviews, or what are the comments if they let their, patients comment on that page, et cetera. And then TikTok, there's clearly a place for TikTok. Dr. McMillan, thoughts on that?
So I think you're dead on with all of that. And I'll be honest, TikTok has a role. We're all trying to figure it out. Some of us have figured it out better than others. Dr. Bechet is someone I know that got on quickly and used it for good. I think, places for the social media is about who you're going to appeal to and what you want. So for me, Twitter, if I read a good article on AJSM as a sports guy, or, something in Helio or Orthopedics Today, that's a great place to, put out there a couple words, here's an update in cardiovascular or whatever for exercise, and tweet it out and tag a bunch of things, tag something related to it. And I've used Twitter sort of strategically with timing. As you mentioned, everything goes away pretty quick. So, I get up at 4:30 every day, East Coast, and I work out, right? So I'll usually post a couple things around that to get my day going, right? And there's people that are up and just, they're firing back and liking it because people are in the gym. If I'm trying to put something out there for patients, for instance, if we're trying to get an update on Google reviews or whatever it might be, I tend to do those more on like an evening or a weekend, because patients are going to have some time. They're having their cup of coffee, and they may choose on Facebook to, do a Google review for us. So it's a lot about timing and knowing who you're trying to reach. I certainly change my wording for maybe the same article for Facebook, which is going to go more to my patients than LinkedIn. And I think that's important to make sure that whatever you put out there isn't a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but it resonates. Something about, decreasing recovery time and pain with surgery, right? Patients like that. That sounds appealing to them. Not necessarily saying that we're using cryoneurolysis for opioid sparing. That doesn't mean anything to a patient. So it's the target audience that you're trying to reach, and make it very simple, because I'll have patients say they came to see me because they saw a post about getting back to work quicker after a rotator cuff surgery. Like that hits home. So it's just getting your foot in the door to appeal to who you need to.
I love that. Dr. Springer, someone who's actively interviewing, residents, fellows, potential partners, probably has an ear to the ground on, how things go for Part 2 boards. What are some ramifications for people that are unlike Dr. McMillan and have kind of zero strategy or think, posting last night's, beer pong tournament was a good idea?
Yeah, I think drawing the line between personal and professional is extremely important, and being careful not to blur those lines where it could hurt you with your employer, where it could hurt you with patients, where it could, hurt your brand, right? Because people can find you. When I was on social media way back when, I had patients find me on Facebook asking me for, opioid refills on Facebook, on social media. So
that's aggressive.
They're out there. So they're out there, they're looking there, and it's very easy. There's a place for the personal part and there's a place for the professional part. And I think separating them is important. The other thing that I would say is the educational aspects of social media are huge. There's huge potential there for educating, residents, fellows, surgeon colleagues, patients. I've often wondered about this, and I don't know that if it's happened, but this always sticks in my mind. And AJ and Sean might be too young to remember this, but Bolo, you might remember this. It was probably about 12, 14 years ago. The Joint Commission went into a residency program and lined up all the residents against the wall and took out all their phones and went through all their photos on their phones and said, that's a HIPAA violation, that's a HIPAA violation, that's a HIPAA violation. Wow. And the program got a 6-digit fine from the Joint Commission for having, potential HIPAA violations on their phone, right? And you see a lot of people posting cases, right, online. And there's educational benefits to it, which are really helpful. But there's also the other side of this, what social media does so much is this self-aggrandization, beating your chest, hey, look what I did. And ultimately, if you're posting a case of, hey, look at this 72-year-old female that did a triphalange and a proximal femoral replacement, and there's not a lot of those floating out there. And ultimately, a patient may somehow recognize an X-ray, or someone may recognize an X-ray, as being their own. And I do have concern that is there potential for patient privacy issues with some of these cases that are being shown. I haven't heard about it. I don't know about it, but I do think it's something we have to be a little bit careful of on the kind of what are some of the potential things you have to be concerned about when we start to get so detailed about some of the stuff we're posting, particularly if it's, patient related.
Well, and what if there's an adverse outcome and they depose that picture from social media? Because, once it's up there, it's hard to get it down. And, the opposite side says, oh, you were so busy posting on social media, you weren't taking care of your patient. That's why this happened. That would be my concern.
Yeah, Marnie, I think that's one good point. I'd even go further. A lot of times I think some of us are asked to comment on cases, and I really like those forums for people to sort of share how they would manage a case. I have to be honest, and maybe I'm being a little too conservative, but I'm a little bit worried sometimes about providing sort of. I love giving my opinion about cases in the right format. I love sharing my experience and expertise. I don't know that I know the rules completely, like Springer's alluding to, in some of these different platforms we're talking about. And that's probably my own ignorance.
One thing that our marketing team is it really harps on, I think maybe Sean, it was you that brought it up earlier. They make us, especially for these case specific ones. And I myself, I agree with you guys. I don't like posting that because I get nervous about what kind of ramifications are out there and probably a number of things, but I guess we focus on getting a full HIPAA release form on everybody for anything. I remember one time we posted a picture from inside of the OR looking at the ceiling, which to me seemed like there was no need for a HIPAA release form because you could never identify this situation. It had nothing, but as an extra precaution, we kind of just globally say if the photo came from a region of the hospital that might have had one patient, if you identify the person that actually was inside the room or was around you, theoretically, we're I guess in our own minds, decreasing that risk. And again, I haven't necessarily adopted that, and I'm probably more conservative on that side to begin with. But maybe that's the solution, is just universally, if you're going to post a case about a patient, you should have them give their permission.
So you stole my thunder, and it's Sean again. Again, as a hospital employed physician, everything I post, if there's a patient or if there's a case, has to have a consent. And to be fair, our consents do get permission generically for pictures, videos, as long as there's no identifying markers in the patient. But we go a step further that if we're actually going to use their information, we let the patient know ahead of time that we're planning on posting this. There's nothing in there, and almost get a double consent. And it's legit, and it goes on file because, to your point, if someone is unhappy or someone has a bad outcome or someone recognizes the image, it's going to come back on you. But the other part of this is we're talking about, the greatness of social media. We've all seen it go wrong too, where someone will post a case that they're very proud of, and maybe it's a little bit, we'll call it cavalier. Maybe it's not this, this standard norm of how you would do a case, and they might feel great about it. And if you get the wrong person, and I believe the cool term is troll, but if you get the wrong person or troll going after you, now you have on a very broad platform, people saying you did the wrong thing, or you were doing it because you were a consultant, or you were doing it and there's no literature behind it, no indication, and God forbid that patient has a complication. I mean, you've just given an attorney, a page and a half of people giving comments, almost expert opinions, stating that what you did was negligent and stupid. So you got to be really careful about what you choose to pick. And I've never posted anything I think is so far over the edge that, I need a high five to feel good about myself, because that just leaves you open, I think, to scrutiny.
Yes, we have to avoid those trolls. So I'd love to wrap this up. I think if there's any topic that we truly need to recap, it's to know your audience, that being your patient base, the political environment, whether it's your senior partners or your department head, or, even the CEO of your hospital. Really figure out what the strategy is. I cannot emphasize enough, and this is as someone who's in, a strategy role and who's played in all of the various corporate roles, understand the strategy. Take time to read a few articles. There's innumerous information out there for you to really read and understand how to utilize platforms. And then also, let's be honest here, think with your lawyer hat on. I know everyone, got massive sphincter tone when I just said that word, but at the end of the day, you will be accountable, and what goes out on the web kind of remains there. So I'd like to leave this on a happy note. I want to go around the room. Let's go ahead and we'll do the reverse. We'll start with Dr. Springer, and then we'll go to Dr. Bolognesi, Dr. McMillan, and then we'll end with AJ Rush over at TBI. What is the one best piece of advice that you could give someone utilizing social media in this day and age to build their brand?
Ooh, one piece of advice, I would say it goes back to that. I would say understand who you're representing every time you post something on social media, because it may not be just yourself.
Yeah, Marney, I agree with Springer. I would just, to be different, I would say, make a real conscious effort to truly understand all of the different platform options. And I say that, as I conceded earlier, as someone who probably still needs to do that and get beyond, say, one or two platforms. But I would say going forward, if you're new coming into this, you probably behooves you to really understand all of the options that are out there, and probably be facile with honestly more than just one or two.
Yeah, from my end, I think it's important that when you're posting, I try to put myself in the shoe of the person I want to read it. So again, if I was to read a post, would the message get through to me? And again, if that post is supposed to reach a patient, will it be something to make a patient want to come in and see me, or maybe tell a friend about it? If it's another physician, would it be enough to make another physician think, hey, maybe this guy knows what they're talking about, or maybe we have something in common and we should try to link up and talk? But certainly, I think you need to have a goal with every post that you put up, not just posting to post.
Let's save the young guy for last. I love it, Marney. Thank you. I echo what everyone said, and obviously, I'm going to try to be different, just mainly so we don't just say the same thing. I think all those things have to be true. So I'm not super heavy on social media. I try to be a little conservative. I think I'm young and, obviously afraid of some of the things we talked about, whatever. But one thing a patient left me with, and therefore I think is something that maybe even for myself I should consider, I actually had a patient come in my office fairly recently, and I consider myself as a spine surgeon, like, oh, old people don't get on social media, so they don't even care. And back pain's kind of an old person's game. But she literally looked at me. She's like, you look nothing like your YouTube videos. You should put way more content out there. And you're much better looking. That's me boosting my own ego. But I think she, to some extent, that was a little bit eye-opening to me that you don't know who's looking out there. You don't know who's listening. And if you follow the guidelines of what Bryan, Sean, and Mike said, I think at the end of the day, if you check those boxes, then information is crucial to connect with your patients. And honestly, people want to know about you. People want to be there. So I think if you're not using social media, I think you're keeping your head in the sand for something that I think it was Bryan that said it earlier, is not going anywhere. And if anything, is going to continue to evolve and be more and more of a staple in how we interact with our patients, our colleagues, and our communities at large.
I love it. Humanize the brand. Just be very intentional with what that brand is. Thank you again to our amazing faculty and to the listeners that took time out of your busy lives to really help prepare for that next step going into practice. We thank you as well. If you want to learn a little bit more about our mission and upcoming events, please visit us at buildingasuccessfulpractice.org.